Hi there. I'm Lauren Hunter, founder and editor-in-chief of HSPJourney.com. Today, we have with us our resident expert and monthly guest writer, Lori Cangilla. Uh, did I say it right? I think I just messed it
You
up
did.
again.
No, you got it perfectly.
Cangilla. Lori, thank you so much for joining us today. It's just a pleasure to have you here. I love working with you. How's your morning so far?
It's been good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. When you asked me to write about aging and HSPs, I thought that's a fabulous topic for us to tackle. So thanks for having.
Yes. So this idea came to me. I wrote up my story of like how I discovered I was highly sensitive. I think I was right around 40 and um, didn't know anything about the sensitivity trait, sensitivity processing sensitivity. Did I say that wrong? Sensory processing sensitivity. And it just blew me away. So, kind of in my mind, as I myself, as a highly sensitive person, have gotten older over the years, it's just on my mind. I've also written about how kids kind of, some of them, I have one kid that sort of graduated out of some of his sensitivity. So that's really interesting. Now, I'm a HSP certified coach, but you are a psychologist. So, and I wanted to give a little bit of background on you, Lori. Lori is just an amazing psychologist, wealth and depth of HSP and psychology wisdom just across the board. She's a private practice and specializes in therapy with highly sensitive women. And just as a mental health professional who's really interested in furthering people's journey as it includes highly sensitivity. And so I just love that. And you're super creative. And also, you have a new book, and I got to review it and do a little write up on hspjourney.com. It is a journal for bright, creative, highly sensitive people forging their way, wander and delve. You can find it on Amazon. It's a beautiful little journal with prompts to write. And I've got things underlined, and um, journaling is just a wonderful way to process. So today we are talking about your recent article from this week called Do Highly Sensitive People Change as They Age? 6 ways to support the HSP aging process. Lori, what wisdom did you uncover? I know you did a bit of research for this piece.
Yeah, so, as a psychologist in a counseling psychology program, I really studied developmental psychology from the perspective of health and what is common expected change that's going to happen in an adult over their lifespan. And we know that there's a lot of good things that happen in adulthood. People become more conscientious, more agreeable, and more emotionally stable. So we know that that's typical across the board for people. But I really wanted to look at how does that look in highly sensitive people? And what was really encouraging is the research that's starting to come out that shows that not only are those things true for highly sensitive people, but also some of the things that we can struggle with when we're younger, especially around our sensitivity to sensory input, starts to improve as we age. So over time, there's a pretty strong linear drop in the degree of sensory overwhelm and overload that highly sensitive people experience. So I know for myself, if I look at myself now as I'm nearing 50 versus when I was in my 20s or teens, even as a child, I am far less likely to be emotionally overwhelmed by life or overwhelmed by sensory things. And part of that is because I think as HSPs, once we know that this is what we're dealing with, once we know that this is who we are, we can start to make those adjustments. But I also think this is part of the normal aging process that happens where we become less sensitive in some ways that can be disruptive. And what's really cool is that we see an uptick in highly sensitive people's receptivity and sensitivity to aesthetic things. So we are more appreciative of beauty, of quiet, of things that make us feel a sense of awe. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. That overwhelm goes down, our appreciation of our surroundings goes up, and we can really move through adulthood in a way that I think is really exciting.
Yeah, that's so wonderful to hear. And I also feel that in my own life as I approach 52. Um, what is that? I mean, it's a cool thing. It's almost like a confluence of peace. And it's, obviously there's a lot of varying degrees of like life circumstance that maybe affect someone. And there's other, if you're going through divorce, if you're experiencing mental health issues, or accidents or things like that, there's obviously contributing factors that maybe might change that a little bit. But overall, that being able to kind of roll with the punches of life a little better, and not to be so worked up about the things that bothered us 5 years ago or 10 years ago, unless you do stupid things like get puppies. We both got puppies this year.
Yeah, getting puppies was an interesting choice at this point.
Definitely. My husband and I feel like, are we too old for this? We've already raised four kids. It's like, this is like having a baby again. So
It
there's definitely
was, yeah.
contributing factors where you're like, oh, maybe I need to make different or better choices in a way that preserves that sense of peace, or self-care is so important for those of us who are sensitive and those of us who are not sensitive, but looking at ways that you can incorporate self-care routines to kind of protect that, especially maybe as energy tapers a little bit, adding more strength training or exercise or things like that build resilience physically. So you have a number of tips in this article, and just share with us a couple of these tips that you feel would be helpful.
So one of the things, and it really ties into what you were saying, is I like the idea of thinking about as we age, how do we need to adjust to our new circumstances? So on a really basic level, most of us don't have as much energy at 40 or 50 as we did at 20 or 30. And so as highly sensitive people, that feeling of being tired, maybe the irritability or the shutdown that can come with that, that's going to happen to us. So how are we going to adjust our routines? How are we going to adjust our life circumstances to accommodate those changes that are happening? I know I am a much better person to the world if I go to bed a little bit earlier, or make sure that try to get a little bit caught up on rest on the weekend, than if I try to, burn the midnight oil night after night after night. That doesn't work for me anymore. And I think in that way that I feel much more confident and comfortable with myself, I'm also okay saying to people at this point in my life, you know what, I'm not going to come out to that event that starts at 9 o'clock at night on a work night, because that's just not going to end well for me. And I don't fret about that in the way that I might have fretted about saying no to something like that when I was younger. So I think allowing yourself to just be more flexible, know what you know about yourself. That's the beautiful part about being an HSP, is that we are almost all very introspective, thoughtful, self-aware people. And so we can use that knowledge to guide our choices. And especially, as you mentioned, some of the things that can happen, aside from maybe not having the same energy, that are harder. Oftentimes as people age, they are dealing with losses of relationships, whether it's to a divorce or we lose people that we love. We might go through changes in health or other things that are difficult. So really adjusting our lives in that way, and trying to accept that new reality and make the changes that make sense for that new reality is so important as HSPs.
Definitely, definitely. Nearing that zone where friends and ourselves as well have lost parents. That's a huge thing. Forces you to look at your life and your childhood and what's ahead. Um, all of those things. So, time for reflection. You talk about taking care of your aging body, just super practical things that are really necessary. And if you have any special health a special diet, special exercise regimens, which few of us by 50 don't have that, right? Most of
Right.
us have some kind of thing, some kind of condition that we have to take care of. Also, maybe this is a separate article in the future, but I have fibromyalgia. I have a chronic illness, and a lot of HSPs do have some kind of chronic illness. And so, what does that look like? I mean, that's a whole extra layer with aging.
Absolutely. And I do think there's at least one more article on that. Rheumatoid arthritis. So yeah, living with like a chronic condition is, yeah, that would be a great article maybe for next time. But
Okay.
I think that is something that people do need to take into consideration. And I think what people often find as they age, even into their late 20s, early 30s, is that the body starts feeling differently, responding differently. And there's nothing there's no way to prevent that entirely. I wish I had a magic cure that said, just do this and it'll be fine. You'll have the body of an 18-year-old and the wisdom
Right.
of a 70-year-old. That would be pretty fabulous. But,
That would be great.
allowing yourself to do the boring everyday things that are self-care, get sleep, eat a reasonably healthy diet for your body, whatever that looks like, get enough water. That's a big challenge for me that I try to, stay hydrated better than I naturally do. Watch the caffeine, watch the substances, watch the sugar, things that we know make our bodies more reactive in negative ways as highly sensitive people. So I think those are all things we can be doing. And it doesn't have to be a grand, massive change all at once. We can start small.
Right. Um, on HSP Journey, we have a number of articles in our self-care category, and I don't think I'll ever run out of ideas for that because there are so many different ways. And I mean, you with your journal provide a great way for people to kind of administer self-care. I think about it. I had to shift in my mentality even of thinking about it as like abundance, like self-care is like something abundant I do for myself. And I had to shift to considering it medicine. Like this is medicine for me because if I don't do it, if I don't stretch, if I don't eat right, like I will have a crash. So like there's a result from not taking care of myself in the same way, like emotional self-care, like boundaries. I feel like boundaries were kind of the undercurrent of some of the things that you shared about our bodies. We have boundaries with our bodies. Like when you get that first twinge of, oh, I did too much yard work, like you need to go inside and you need to save it for another day, and not push past where in our 20s or 30s we might have pushed past some of those signals that our body was like done, or emotional signals. Maybe you're at a family reunion or a Thanksgiving dinner and the conversation turns political or religious, and we're supposed to avoid those things to have peaceful conversations with extended family members, and it just treads into dangerous territory. And you think, if I stay in this conversation, I'm going to have an elevated nervous system, I'm going to yell at someone, I'm going to be taken to a place I don't want to be. So that whether it's physical, emotional, or that spiritual, somebody's picking at you, um, give us just a couple of ways to regulate ourselves. It falls in the bucket of self-care, but it's more than that for us who are sensitive.
So I think the most basic, boring thing we can do is pay attention to our breathing. Um, and breathing is wonderful because it's something you can do anywhere. So any of those times where we're feeling pushed beyond our boundaries, where our self-care is starting to suffer in some way, we're probably not breathing as well as we need to. So just allowing ourselves to notice, how am I breathing? And when we notice that we're holding our breath or we're breathing quickly or shallowly, allowing ourselves just to see, can I experiment with just easing that up a little bit, just allowing myself to breathe a little more slowly, a little more deeply, and see, how does my body respond to that. And it's not about forcing any kind of new rhythm of breath on yourself, but just allowing yourself to play with, can I slow myself down a little bit? Because when we do that, then we think more clearly. We give ourselves like that break that we need sometimes to find the words. Because a lot of highly sensitive people need that moment to figure out, what is it that I want to say, or what am I reacting to here? So taking that breath, or those few breaths can be a way to do that.
I was at a party recently. It was a girlfriend birthday party, where she does this fun thing where everybody brings favorite, like 5 little favorite things, and you kind of talk about why you brought these things, and then everybody gets to pick 5 things off the table. And it got too loud, so it's all hardwood floors, and there were like 30 women. I only knew maybe 10% of, so maybe a little more than that. Maybe I knew five or 10 people. But I had a full on like nervous system overwhelm because of the loud environment. It was late, 7 o'clock at night on a weekday. And I took myself to the living room where there weren't a lot of people and sat in an easy chair, kind of did what you said, like notice the breathing, put in my earplugs, had a minute. And I was definitely self-conscious that I separated myself because at a group of women, like the expectation is everyone is like chattering and, you don't go off by yourself. But as I have gotten older, I've felt more comfortable being able to do that. And I even actually stepped outside for like 5 minutes. And then I came back in, and then somebody came in the room and started up a conversation with me. And I was fine. And so that was a huge thing because normally, many of us are super hyper aware of like how other people are viewing us. And that has been a real stumbling block, I would say, for me, like with social maybe anxiety. Um, but that I felt like, no, I have to take care of myself because I'll get a really bad headache. I was in a car accident 7 months ago, and I still have some concussion leftover symptoms. And so if I don't do that, separate myself, put in the earplugs, breathe, take a minute, I considered leaving, but I didn't. I did those few self-care things and I stayed, and then I enjoyed the rest of the night. And so just whoever's watching, those things are really, you are capable of just incorporating a few of these self-care tips to stay in your life, instead of leaving, feeling bad, maybe that you had to leave the social situation. Like some of these self-care tips like can really help you plug into your life and like have an emotionally healthy, socially healthy life. And so thank you so much for these tips. Please go to hspjourney.com/. HSP-aging is where the article and the links will be below this video here on YouTube. There are 6 fabulous tips and some links to really great research and Lori's summary of how this research came together to help us understand better how HSPs age. Also, Lori runs a fabulous website called singularlysensitive.com. Correct? You have to think about the spelling. I'll put the links down below.
You do.
Yes, and we'll put links to her website, information on her practice. Her private practice is there, as well as her book. We'll put links to the Wander and Delve journal over on Amazon. Thank you so much for being here today. What a fabulous conversation. I appreciate it so much. Any parting wisdom for our watchers and listeners?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And not so much parting wisdom, but just inviting people to share maybe in the comments or to get in touch with us by email about what they're doing to make life easier for themselves and embrace aging as highly sensitive people. I'd love to hear because I feel like HSPs come up with some creative ways to take care of themselves, and I'd love to hear other strategies that people are using.
What a great invitation. Yes, you can email me, editor@hspjourney.com. Thanks so much again, and have a wonderful and blessed day.
You too.